back here on the platform, and today we are speaking with Neely. And Mr. Neely, I promised to talk a little bit more about global warming.
Yes.
You know, Godfrey Enos talks a whole lot about it, and I believe in global warming.
Yes.
It's and its impact on the climate.
Yes.
But we have to admit that even with global warming, we've not had hurricanes like 29 and 26.
No.
We've not had hurricanes like 1866.
No. And that's one of the arguments that I used to because back then the hurricanes were stronger.
Yes.
They were definitely stronger. And if global warming is making hurricanes more, the argument that they use is that global warming is making hurricanes more intense and they're making them more frequent.
But that cannot be true.
No, that's not true because back then we had more. For example, in 1933, you had 4 hurricanes in one season and 1 tropical storm. We've never had, for the last 20-something years, we've only, in fact, I'd say in the last 50, 60 years, you haven't had a hurricane where just one hurricane impacted the Bahamas.
How would you classify Katrina?
Katrina was a hurricane of, I should say, circumstances. Katrina bucked up with the Gulf Loop current, which is a warm area, and it intensified, explodes exponentially once it hit that Gulf current.
And Katrina really was formed in the Bahamas.
Yes, it formed in the Bahamas. Katrina was tropical depression number 10, which impacted the Bahamas, and it degenerated, and then it went to the east of the Bahamas, and it became tropical depression number 12. And tropical depression number 12 passed to us as a tropical depression, which became Katrina once it left the Bahamas. So we provided the strength for Katrina.
Yes. But I want to go back to this matter of global warming because from time to time there's a gentleman by the name of Godfrey Enos.
Yes, I know.
You know him, right?
Yes.
We have these discussions.
Yes.
And I have to row him sometimes.
Yes.
On his knowledge of these matters, of hurricane matters.
Yes.
And he has been telling me that these hurricanes were becoming more intense as a result of global warming.
No.
And I had to tell him that is untrue.
So you tell him for me. Tell him that's not true for me.
Mr. Neely.
Okay,
Yes.
I will tell him.
Okay.
Mr. Neely.
No, because
Mr. Neely said that's not true.
I'm going to give. When I say something, I don't.
Let me make this point.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Jones is a very, for those who don't know, a very biblical fellow, right?
Yeah.
I'm seriously.
Okay.
Right? He believes in the Bible, right?
Yes.
He's not a scientist.
You don't believe in the Bible?
No, but he's not a scientist.
Yes.
That's true.
He's not a scientist, and he always finds it difficult to accept scientific answers.
Okay.
Yes, but your scientific answer with respect to global warming and the strengthening of hurricanes or the intensity of hurricanes is wrong. That's what the meteorologists say.
And
right?
I'm going to give. Yeah, that's what I. And when I speak,
can you say that again to him?
It's not making hurricanes stronger. It's not making them more frequent. For example, I'm going to when I speak to university. I went to China, to Peking University, several years ago, and I spoke to the class, the entire school actually, and I said, yes, I said that global warming is not making hurricanes stronger. They all got up and they clapped for me, for probably about 5 minutes non-stop because they want to hear it. But I tell them, don't take my word for it. You look at the facts. The facts of the matter. The strongest hurricane on record still remains Super Typhoon. Don't mind not what they said in the Philippines last year. Strongest typhoon on record remains Super Typhoon Tip. Tip occurred in 1979. The next one after that, there's another one called Super Typhoon Forest. Forest occurred and that's the 8th most intense hurricane. And if it's getting stronger from 1979 to now, we definitely would have seen that storm would be replaced by other intense storms. We had the hurricane, the typhoon that destroyed the Philippines last year. That's the 8th most intense hurricane on record. But in terms of intensity, in terms of frequency, it's way down. The hurricane total last year, throughout the region was down, and that was one of the only hurricanes that impacted any of the region. In the Philippines, you have 2 lists of hurricanes. You have, back instead of having a list of 22, they have a list of 40 plus in hurricanes because they have on average about 8 to 12 hurricanes a year. Last year, it was significantly down. That was the only major hurricane that impacted the Philippines last year, and same thing the year before that. And throughout the region, throughout and in the Asia region, throughout the Caribbean, we had less hurricanes this year, and no one seems to know why. But the problem is that global warming always seems to get the blame for everything. If we have intense hurricanes, they blame it on global warming. If you have less intense hurricanes, they blame it on global warming. If you have a very cold winter, they blame it on global warming. So the problem is that global warming takes a bad rep for basically climate change. Basically, the frequency in terms of in terms of weather events, you have peaks and lulls. In some areas, sometimes you have extremes, sometimes you have mild winds, sometimes you have strong winds.
So do you believe, Mr. Neely, that this is a cyclical thing, or is due to man's habits?
Now, don't get me wrong. I don't say that man is not impacting the weather. They definitely, the results are clear on that. Man is impacting the weather, but in terms of making the hurricanes stronger, like they claim, or making them more intense, that's not the case. And I don't just have me, the more popular meteorologist, the doctors, like Professor William Gray, who he disagrees that global warming is making hurricanes stronger. And even Chris Lancey, the National Hurricane Center specialist.
Yes, I read. Now, there was a special session of the House of Assembly, and I want you to talk about that. It happened during the administration of Charles Dundas.
Charles Dundas, yes.
That's the same man whose
Senator.
wife was responsible for instituting, organizing the Dundas Civic Center.
Yes.
Yeah. Around 1929.
Yes.
What took place in that assembly?
Well, they discussed the hurricane itself, the impact that it had, and they got reports from all the commission. Every commissioner, whenever there's a hurricane, every commissioner would make a report, and they just discussed the report, and they discussed what they would do to alleviate the poverty in many of the islands as well. Because they also discussed how they would for example, in this hurricane, one of the things that they did, if a person was a widow, they would build the house back at £40 and give them it free. But if you were not a widow and your house was destroyed, they would allow you to pay, I think it was £40. And that's one of the things they discussed in the meeting itself, the assembly. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a kind of urban renewal effort back there in 1929. Huh? Very interesting. Indeed.
What about Mr. Neely? What about the hygiene or the sanitary conditions? You know, I can remember as a boy, people in Bain Town still going to the well, and there were no pumps and indoor plumbing. How did those things? How did the hygienic state of the Bahamas was impacted by a hurricane lasting 3 days?
Yeah. Well, I would only assume that, like, for example, the flood waters, the waters were held for, waters were on the streets of New Providence and Andrew for a pretty long time after that, and there was a fear there would be an outbreak of cholera.
Yeah, and also mosquitoes with malaria, maybe not malaria, but dengue fever and
I know they did discuss cholera. I know for sure they discussed cholera, but I don't know if malaria or any other diseases, but they did talk about the impact with the hurricane in terms of the spread of cholera.
What I like about this book in particular, Mr. Neely, is that you have a number of accounts by Bahamians who lived in
the storm. Yes.
In the storm. Some of them were very young.
Yes.
Like Sir Derwent Knoll says, he was 12
years old at the time. Yes.
At the time. And then you have Macushla Hazelwood,
yes,
the daughter of
Sir Asa
Pritchard.
Yes.
They live in San Souci,
yes,
at the time.
Hilbert Pinder from
Rocky
Farmer.
The late Rocky Hilbert Pinder.
Yes.
He had the most extensive account.
Yes.
Of what took place.
Yes. He talked about his father owned the farm, I think, out there.
In Fox Hill.
Yeah, and the hurricane destroyed the farm, and they had to, he said the water was up to 5 feet depth, and the melons, he remember, we call them the watermelons and the cantaloupes were floating out in the road, and he had to go and collect them. And his father went to, it was so bad that he didn't have any, they were very poor. His father went to the Red Cross for support, because they were handing out blankets and handing out food, and the person told him, said, no, you have money, so you can go and this is for the poor people. And
Yeah, so Orville Turnquest has an account here, but in 1929 he was only born in
he was only born, yeah, he was only
in
born
ni- in
basically
1929.
basically talked about what persons they would
What-
listen on the
yeah,
on the yeah.
what people
Told them, yes.
told them. The same thing from the Honorable Al Fahana.
Yes.
Who
He talked about how they noticed they would watch the birds and accolades, and that's how they prepared for storms. I also have my grandfather Jerry Gibson. I have persons like Ilford Forbes from South Andrews, Israel Forbes from South Andrews, Shiva Ferguson, who's also from South Andrews, and you have other persons throughout the province and Nassau give me their recollections. Edward Bain from Mangrove Key, and Bastian Miller from Mangrove Key. And
Okay.
I have a whole slew of collections from this storm, but the problem is that I can only have certain amount, so I just picked out a select few, and included it in the book.
Yeah, what about the marketing of this book? This is, I'm sure, not just a book that you wrote
No.
for Bahamians.
Most of my books, the universities, especially universities and colleges throughout, in fact, even as far as China, they use my books to teach in their meteorological classes. And if you notice my book, I deliberately have half of it is devoted to hurricanes itself, and the other half is basically on the impact of the hurricane on the Bahamas. The reason why I wrote half of it, because to be included in the libraries and the textbook for certain schools, you have to have a certain percentage of the book talking about hurricanes in general, and that's one of the reasons why. And those are used in textbooks. They're used here in the Bahamas as well, but throughout the region. And my book, they're available throughout the world, online, BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon.com. It's available as an ebook now, which is what everyone's turning to now. And
Nassau Harbor, you know, you had storage of sponge,
Yes.
but you also had the destruction of Long Wharf.
yes, it was totally destroyed. Fort Montague was destroyed. Fort Wayne Castle was destroyed in the hurricane as well. And Long Wharf was destroyed. There was boulders. There's a picture that I have in the book with Long Wharf destroyed, where persons were sitting on the boulders that the hurricane brought into brought in from the sea, seabed, and it was Long Wharf was wiped out.
Do you know that Bishop Enos was responsible for the reconstruction of the
It
seawall?
was.
No, I didn't know that.
That's the
Oh,
specialty.
really? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
see what?
He did a good job, because they never had any problem after 29 hours.
That's right.
Yes. After the 29 hurricane, the then government got him to build.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
And he moved
So you
this,
come from a smart set of family.
The center part,
the senator.
Center,
tower,
really?
he moved that from Trinity by the Kirk.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
The same way the Egyptians used to move those big boulders
Yes.
to build
Yeah.
the
So how did he move it?
by rocks.
Really? Oh,
He's an engineer, natural engineer. And we had probably a grade 4 education,
oh, okay.
if that.
It's kind of hit and miss kind of fellow.
Oh, okay, okay. So he's lucky.
Yeah. He also was responsible for the construction of Royal Bank of Canada.
Oh, really?
And that's
Yeah, because
built
Royal Bank was destroyed in this storm
that's
as
built on the
well.
water. That's built on the water.
Yes, okay.
You can hear the water underneath underneath the floor.
They told me it was reclaimed land,
Yeah, Papa
and
built
because of the same hurricane.
the Harry Oaks Monument
Yes.
down there. He built that too.
Oh, okay.
So Royal Bank was destroyed in the 29 hurricane.
Yes, it was destroyed, and the building next to it was destroyed, which is the Munson Steamship Building. The roof of Royal Bank was destroyed, and the Munson Steamship Building, which was right next to Royal Bank, was also destroyed as well. The roof caved in on that building as well.
This cost the then government
A lot of money.
Pretty penny,
yes,
yes,
Yeah.
several $1 million at least.
several $1 million.
Yeah.
But of course, the funds came mostly from the mother country. Eh?
No.
Some not
No?
in this storm, no, because at the time, like I said, with this hurricane, there was a letter that recorded where they wrote to the king
To King George.
and he told him that he can't assist them in significantly because of the impact that the Great Depression was having on them. But this one, they were not relying on it because the Depression era was there. So a lot of them had, like the churches, they held programs, and in some places they rebuilt. Took years to rebuild. 1931, 1931, and 1932. 77% of the budget was devoted to the rebuilding effort.
That is what made this hurricane so bad for the Bahamian people.
Yes.
Because it came at a time when the world was in depression.
Yes, and there was a drought in the Central and Southeast Bahamas, so they couldn't rely on the Central and Southeast Bahamas for support.
For any food.
Yes. No.
But luckily, at that time, the population of New Providence was very small.
Small, yes. Back then, most of the population was centered in the Family Islands.
Yes, yes.
And Family Islands was where everything was happening. Like you said, in Mango Free, that was the center of growth for Andros. And so many persons lived on the Family Islands. And they didn't come to Nassau to look for jobs because there was none.
Yes.
Sponging.
Yeah, there was only sponging. Sponging was an island thing. They went to the area of the mud and Andros. So most of the persons lived on the Family Islands.
Mr. Neely,
Yes.
you're a smart man. Thank you so very much for being here today.
It was a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
And thanks once again for my book.
Thank you, Mr. Eunice.
I'm collecting all of your books now.
Yes.
You've been here about 3 or 4 times on this
Yes,
program.
I've been here, and you've been getting the book every time
And
I
I'm
come.
getting a book every time. And I've been reading them,
Yes.
and I'm enjoying them as well.
Thank you, I appreciate
Because in
it.
addition to learning about the hurricane, or the various hurricanes, you learn about the history of the country.
Yes, and I try and include a bit of Bahamian history in it as well.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Godfrey Inius.
Thank you.
Take your paperback book home. Thank you for watching and listening to our program today. Good evening, everyone.